Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Will Mabey. I am the Community Relations Coordinator for the Roswell Park Center for Indigenous Cancer Research, and welcome to our first webinar of 2021. We have had a strong audience and it continues to grow, and I think today's discussion is a representation of that. So I wanted to first formally introduce Santi Smith, who is a multidisciplinary artist from Six Nations. She trained at Canada's National Ballet School, completed physical education and psychology degrees from McMaster University, and a dance MA from York University. Santi premiered her inaugural work in 2004 and later founded Kahawi Dance Theater. If I'm incorrect, Santi, you can correct me, which has grown into an internationally renowned company. Her body of work includes 14 productions and numerous short works and collaborations. She is a sought-after teacher and speaker on Indigenous performance and culture. She embodied storytelling and performance. Her work speaks for Indigenous identity and continuity. Smith is the 19th Chancellor of McMaster University. So, Santi, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sego, Skanagoga. Santi Smith, Dagalunyakwa, Nyungyats, Gongwehoega, Nyangahaga, Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Greetings, everyone. It's great to see and be a part of the conversation. Nyawe to Roswell Park for inviting me to share my perspective. I'm going to offer a very informal conversation, and I'm really looking forward to having some discussion and answer some questions. And I'll give you a little bit of background of who I am in case you don't know a little bit of my history. Thank you for that introduction, Will. I wanted to start because it's become a big part of my process, continues to be, to acknowledge the Ohandu Galiwandagwa, the words before all else. And I wanted to share this with you. Some of you might know the importance of these words, and you can follow along. And if it's new, it's a really great way to have an acknowledgement in placing ourselves in context with the natural and living universe. Please bear in mind, as I am learning and continuing to learn, I am also recovering some of my Gayengeha, my Mohawk language, and working with people and community to help me understand our Ongwe Hoe Neha, our ways of thinking and being. So this is a part of that. So I'm going to begin with Thanksgiving address. Se watahosios ne gat ne galiwesa ne ona ne angali hohetste gat no wala donserla. These words of thanksgiving, they help to bring our minds and hearts together, to give thanks, to affirm our interconnections, cultivate compassion, and recognize our responsibilities for living in peace and balance with all creation. They help to bring our minds together as one, and to acknowledge those who are sick and hurting, that these words offer peace and offer a sense of belonging to the greater universe. Dayetinu walaro ne ungwe sua, eto nayonto hage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks and acknowledge all people, our ancestors, our family and friends, people from all nations in all walks of life. Now our minds are one. Dayetinu walaro ne yetini stoha johun jade, eto nayonto hage ne nigwat nigula. We give thanks to our mother, the earth, for she provides us with everything that we need to survive and thrive. Now our minds are one. Dayetinu walaro ne gatne galunyo, eto nayonto hage ne nagwat nigula. We give our thanks to the waters, from the oceans to the streams, to the waters flowing in our body, and we recognize that water is life. Now our minds are one. Dayetinu walaro ne ganzon sua, eto nayonto hage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the fish life, who help to purify the water and provide us with nourishment. Now our minds are one. Dayetinu walaro ne yotunduni, Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the plants, all of the plants, from the grasses to the medicines that help to purify and strengthen our bodies. Now our minds are one. Dieti nualado ne yotzi nawasua. Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the insect life who help to pollinate the plants, the pollinators. And now our minds are one. Dietinualado ne jonhekwa. Eto nayontohoge ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to our sustenance foods. Now our minds are one. That includes the three sisters, the important corn beans and squash. Dietinualado ne wa ya niyunta. Eto nayontohoge ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks and greetings to the fruits for helping to nourish our body. And we acknowledge the strawberry and the medicine that it has, especially for women. Now our minds are one. Dieti nualaro ne gondirlo. Eto nayonto ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to all of the animals, some who sacrifice their lives to help sustain us. Now our minds are one. Dieti nualaro ne ziton ungua. Eto nayonto ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the birds whose beautiful singing uplift our spirit, bringing peace and calm to our hearts. Now our minds are one. Dieti nualaro ne galunda ongua. Eto nayontohange ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the trees. We cannot live without the oxygen that they provide. Their sap and roots provide nourishment and cleansing for our body. Now our minds are one. Dieti nualaro ne zower la wunyer. Eto nayontohange ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the circulating winds, the four winds, who travel the earth, bringing new life and breath. Now our minds are one. Dieti nualaro ne ladiwerlas. Eto nayontohange ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the grandfather thunderers for purifying the air and awakening the earth. Now our minds are one. Dazit dawanualado ne angjagene galakwa. Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to our eldest brother's son, who appears each morning to provide sunshine, protection, and sustenance for all living things. Now our minds are one. Dietinualado ne asatanega wat nirele. Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to our grandmother Moon for her powerful pull on the waters and connection to women and birth. Now our minds are one. Dietinualada ne yotzi ston warunyo. Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to the stars and the cosmos for providing us with guidance and direction. Now our minds are one. Dietinualado ne ya diunkiadado. Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks and greetings to our spiritual guardians and protectors who help to provide clarity of mind and peace in our hearts. Now our minds are one. Dadzit wanu walaro ne sungwayandiso. Eto nayontohage ne nagwat nigula. We give thanks to all creation, the great spirit, the creative energy and force that lives in everything and everywhere. Now our minds are one. Da eto ne yawanage. Da eto. Nyawe. So these words are very important to begin each day and is a very mindful affirmation about our acknowledging our interconnections and our responsibilities as human beings to live in balance, in peace, and to be custodians of the natural world and to look to the natural world for guidance, and that it is our greatest teacher. So it is foundational to a Ongwehoe Neha way of thinking about the world. And thinking about the world in this way does promote peace in balance, skana. I've been working with this for a while in my creative work, but also in my role as an artistic director, as a leader, to bring those concepts and fundamental guiding principles and values into the way that I work. And I relate with collaborators, and also relate and connect with land. So I've been doing a lot of land-based creation in Kayangahaga territory here at Six Nations of the Grand River, but also in our traditional homelands of upper state New York and up into the Adirondack Mountains. So with that beginning, I would also just give a little bit of context for my journey. I'll be sharing some personal insights. And for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised and living now on Six Nations. My family is a long line of Kayangahaga artists that artistry and creativity has been on both sides of my family. So I acknowledge that I come from that rich lineage, and my role is really moving this forward through embodied performance, storytelling, and sharing culture in a way that brings knowledge from the past and transforms it and makes it relevant for today and in our lives today. I grew up dancing. So before I had any formal training, as soon as I would hear music, I would fall into a dream world of movement and what I would call now is improvisation. So I was that kid who was dancing around and people thought was very strange or cute, whatever. So and my family being artists, they acknowledge that, and that is a part of our way of thinking about when you're part of your journey as a human is to discover your gift. What is the gift that you have as an individual that you can share with community? So I was lucky to find my gift very early, and I continue to dance today. What really got me into formal training, though, is I was in a series of accidents and I broke both of my legs at a very young age. All in around the age of 3 years old, I was run over by a car and I was in the hospital for a month in traction and in the body cast for a month. And later I had a broken ankle and had to be in a cast for that. So I really had to learn to walk 3 times. And part of my rehab at that time was my parents obviously were a wreck, and the doctor advised them to put me into something that would strengthen my legs and make sure that my alignment was going to be okay. And then they put two and two together, knowing my interest in dance, and thought of ballet because of the alignment of the body. And so at the age of 3, which is very young, I started formal ballet training in the little town of Brantford, which is close to Six Nations. And of course, I loved it. I fell in love with hearing music and dancing and the discipline of it, and also the creativity of it, creative movement, again, being inspired by music. And so I continued on. My legs did strengthen. I mean, I think I have misaligned hips, but I think a lot of people have, we're not symmetrical in some way. And so I did strengthen my legs. And I went then on to train at the National Ballet School for 6 years, which was intensive physical training and school. So that took me away from Six Nations. And I was in the world of ballet, which is a world all unto its own. And up until about the age of 17, 18, I had the time when people are thinking about identity and what they want to do for their career. I had some concerns and questions about who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. I did still love to dance. Maybe I didn't want to be a ballerina. And the idea that I was only really working on European Western based stories and little or no connection to my own stories from home, and missing home, missing that sense of community and missing my family because I was training away from home. So at that time, I decided to stop dance, and I figured I wasn't going to be a dancer. I went to finish off the last bit of high school that I needed, and then I went to McMaster University and got a degree in kinesiology, which at that time the degree was honors of physical education and psychology, thinking that I was going to become a clinical psychologist. And I really enjoyed it, by the way. I really did that. But and then in my physical activity, I was keeping active by going to the gym and doing things like that. Um, Again, then I had a pivotal moment where I was going to do some extra courses at U of T in Toronto, and met up with a lot of Indigenous artists, some from Six Nations, like Gary Farmer, and they all encouraged me to get back into dance and creating work and choreography. So Gary Farmer in 1996 commissioned me to create two short contemporary dance performances for his um, documentary he was directing called The Gift. And you can actually go to the National Film Board of Canada and log in and see that documentary. It's a beautiful documentary on the importance and significance of corn across the Americas. And I was tasked with providing two dances that honored that strong physical, spiritual, mental connection to corn as a sustenance food, as a johekwa. And so that brought back that idea of creating, being a creator, not just a dancer. And I was, for the first time, in a studio listening to Haudenosaunee women's singers and thinking about stories of Sky Woman, a part of our creation story, and her journey from Sky World, and corn, beans, and squash. So I created two short choreographies, and they're in there. And that really launched me back into the performing arts world, but in a new way that I was interested in and excited, and to create stories and share stories that came from who I was as a Haudenosaunee, as a Kayangehaga, Gongwe woman. And since that time, I've built up a repertoire of work, collaborations nationally and internationally. I founded Kahawi Dance Theater. Kahawi in Kayangeha means to carry, and it's also a family name. And really, that's what the company does, is carry forward stories, philosophy, ongwe hoi neha, ways of being, and continuing to move further and further into that in terms of our leadership and how we have our company governance and the principles that guide the company, from also a very specific creative process, which is our Indigenous methodologies, Indigenous dramaturgy, what are our models. And this is really analyzing and making sure that how we're working is coming from that Haudenosaunee's perspective and lens, and filtering out colonial influences that have come into the way we are working. So that's a little bit about my background. So through song and dance, I was able to strengthen my body, and the importance of acknowledging and working with, collaborating with a lot of Indigenous artists and knowledge keepers about song and dance, and the importance that it has in health and wellness, and then also being creative in what is in my little bio there is continuance, the continuing to exist, and drawing strength from culture and bringing that into our everyday life. Another reason why I wanted to create and work on these stories is because I don't have language. So part of my process is currently and has been for a while looking at Gayangeha and the ways that language guides our ways of viewing the world, the metaphors that it has for deeper understanding. And so, not just conversational language, but really deep um, understanding that raise our consciousness, especially as it relates to the Ohandu Galiwantegwa, our relationship to the living universe. So that has been my trajectory, and I continue to learn as a leader of an arts company, as someone in community who teaches about dance and culture, and also is the 19th Chancellor of McMaster University. I bring with it all of my experience, and that I continue to learn from many great people over the years, and also to keep understanding how to access creativity. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of creativity is because the topic is so immense and we could talk for many days on this. But there's a couple little insights that have come to me over the years and in conversation with many artists, so a lot of them from other nations around the world. Um, that creative process or that creative spirit. And so even in the address that I gave at the end about acknowledging the creative force or creative energy, the spirit of which is also called spirituality, and how do we, aside from acknowledging and giving thanks to that, how do we invite that into our lives? What is the actions and the practices that we can raise our level of consciousness and awareness so that we're moving through creativity? And part of it for me is really going into how do we embody the natural patterns of the universe, uh, follow the laws of nature, and also what has come up is that connection of replicating and becoming in sync with the natural patternings. And this also promotes health. So when you're looking at song and dance in our community, in Haudenosaunee, in our ceremonies, and also a lot of ceremonies around the world for Indigenous people and other nations, the sense of our circle dances, are the way that we sing and call and response, the tonality of our voices, um, really is about harmonizing our body with the natural living universe. So we're trying to synchronize that in a way to unify and be harmonized, but also to keep replicating that. And as as we know, in terms of health, our body is always trying to find a state of equilibrium, of balance. In balance, which we call skana, also is peace. And how do we embody, and what are the actions that will bring us skana, which will bring us into balance, especially when we're living in a world that is very out of balance, that is as we all know, is many challenges, even environmentally in terms of toxins, and then also imbalance in terms of our thinking and the values that we have. So song and dance are a way to physically bring ourselves into balance, and acknowledging the cycles of the seasons. So right now we're just finishing the midwinter cycle, and that really is, and I've been working on it just this week and last week, a creative way of expressing our connection to this time of the year, the midwinters, and midwinter dreaming. And that was a part of our old way of having our ceremonies. There was a day dedicated for sharing dreams, sharing the story, whether they're, funny or, important. And that idea, that dream realm or that spirit realm was really important. That is also where creativity lives, in the unknown, in the dream, in the nighttime dreaming, in daydreaming. And that's a lot of how I ended up creating some of my work as well. That it did come from what I call active daydreaming, and it's just trying to allow myself to open up into that space. So this time, we just finished. I commissioned different artists to talk about this winter season, and for us, it's really about acknowledging that the earth is resting, that the snow is like a blanket that covers the earth to sleep and to rejuvenate and to renew herself. And so that when she awakens in the spring, that the cycle will continue. And we acknowledge that this is a part of the cycle, and it's really beautiful way of thinking about the natural world and the importance of the stages that are happening. So creatively, I created a short dance about, and it's all online in video. It'll be out soon. It's not out there yet, but you could Google it maybe next week, or at kahawidance.org, or at Kahawi Dance, and see the work. And Rick Hale from Six Nations talks about the story, the contest between the spirit of winter and the spirit of spring. So that's a little bit about the importance of that creative force. The other thing that I wanted to say about that is for me, it's also linked to the creation story and Sky Woman's journey. So every day, whether we are conscious of it or not, we are replicating the cycles of the natural cycles. Even in our walking and our gait, we're moving circularly. I don't think there's a bone in our body that is linear. There's curvilinear. And so we are a part of this, whether we consciously acknowledge it. And so I lost my train of thought there. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. Related to the creation story. So Sky Woman, if you're familiar with the creation story, came from sky realm, and she fell into darkness, into a water world. And this for me is important and it's a part of the creative process of really. One interpretation is that there was the chief in Sky World had a dream of a world below, and an idea of that. And when Sky Woman fell through, she made that dream come manifest and grow, and new life continued. So in that idea of a creative process, I feel like there's an idea or a dream or a vision or an intention that wants to become manifest. And then we go about one of the ways that we have to really, as artists, work through is diving into darkness. And darkness in this sense is not negative. It's actually the state of potentiality, the state of nothingness or everything. And the place of unknown, the place of transformation, the place of innovation and new discovery, which then could be planted and grown, like when Sky Woman landed on the back of Turtle Island and she danced in a counterclockwise direction, and all of the seeds and everything that she brought from Sky World were moved around, and the earth beneath her feet moved, and she created her world. Her world became manifest. So I think that for me, that's really symbolic, very basic, fundamental Haudenosaunee ideas of making dreams become manifest, into the importance that artists, and if you're a scientist, if you're thinking about wanting a new way of thinking, that you do have to go through that transformational place. That place often is scary. That place is not always beautiful, in a similar way that when a baby is born, or when something is born or created, it's not always it's a struggle. And to embrace that there has to be all of that involved of birthing, and I feel like sometimes people always want it to be beautiful, and there's no struggle or challenge, or you're not challenging yourself, or you're not diving deep enough, and that it just stays surface level. And as long as you're moving into that space with good intention and surrender and guidance, protection. Part of our process when we work with Kahawi dance and we're working in that way where we're falling into a place of transformation, we have to use protection, which is we do a lot of Thanksgiving, and we do smudging. We bring our ancestors with us. We acknowledge the strength of our culture and ask for guidance in doing that. I have a question here. My story. Great. I wanted, before I go on to any more, because I think I wanted to show a video, a couple of videos, because I have been talking about creative process and land-based work. I wanted to share you a little improvisation that I did. This is for an upcoming show that we haven't produced called Skana, and it's set in 2050, post climate change catastrophe, when people have to flee as climate refugees up into the upper state, New York, Adirondack Mountains. And this is a little exploration, but you might see me trying to fall into that creative force, and also the land-based work that we're doing. So try to make this happen. Going into share screen. Mm. Uh-oh. Let me go back. Oh, share. They stopped it? Am I back?
Yeah, I think we lost our video feed, Santi, is all.
With it, okay. Well, we saw enough of that anyway. So that's a little bit of those are the interesting. I find I was supposed to be back in upper state New York there at that exact spot this summer, working again to like another part of the process, but we couldn't go because of COVID. So I'm hoping that this coming summer that we can go back and work in the land there. Part of what I was trying to do there was how do we really listen. And I think that's important for a lot of people in a lot of um, situations. How do we really have deep listening? And then when we're working, say if we're working in the land and we want to have gather information, is how do we actually connect? How can we connect to land? And how can we listen to her? And maybe ancestrally we did have that more fine and deep communication with her and all the living things, but we have had that not activated. So part of the work is trying to fall into that creative force and that natural force. So that was a little bit of what we're doing there. So I'm going to speak to some of these questions. Santi, could you speak about how or why you created your first dance theater piece, Kahawi? Great. Hi, Robert. Hi, Bob. I hope you're well. Sure. So Kahawi was my first major production, and it took 5 years, 6 years in the making, and it really solidified my creative process in the way that I like to work, which is a lot of community research, commissioning Indigenous artists from musicians to uh, dancers. And Kahawi was really like a family creation story. And what was the impetus for and the inspiration was the fact that my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, had passed away, and I had my daughter. So that continuation of life, that cycle of life, was very present and powerful at that time. And also to not only to acknowledge that cycle, but to bring awareness and sharing um, to the stage, Haudenosaunee understanding of many things, including the concept of birth and death and rebirth and spirit in our songs and dances, and the importance of women. And so the work that I do is also very female or Gongwe based. And so that was a part of it, and that really launched my choreographic career and my work as a dance director. We continued to tour that work. So that premiered in 2004, and I did that as an independent artist before there was a Kahawi dance theater. And in the next year, Kahawi became an arts organization, and we have worked on that piece almost every year since, whether in excerpt form, and we've toured it, and it's sort of one of the grounding choreographies. And it also's got Haudenosaunee social dance steps, so the embodiment is very very much connected to Six Nations. Those, you can view that online. Okay, another question from Elizabeth. Thank you very much for sharing with us today. Can you share more about your practice of active daydreaming? Really, it's just being lost in a daydream. What was really funny? So my company, Kahawi Dance Theater, is based on Six Nations, their home community, and Toronto is our home city, and we do work in both places. Since the pandemic, I've been home at Six Nations, but there was a lot of time traveling, commuting, and I came to realize that the commute was a big part of my creative process because I was, thinking and daydreaming. I actually created so many songs on the way on my commuting out of Toronto that actually made it into performances. So I think it's something that I have done instinctively ever since I was that 2-year-old kid who fell into a dream world of dance. That for some reason I'm able to drop everything else that's happening around me and fall into a, a, a creative space. Now, that doesn't always happen. And I guess it's sort of trying to find the tools and the techniques to get you to that place. Um, and sometimes it happens without expectation that all of a sudden an idea comes. Um, I guess you could say it would be also like a meditation, but I don't even do it that way, mm, as a meditation. One of the ways in terms of embodiment. So there's the thinking part of it or the dreaming part of it. But then for which I think is important for everybody, not just performing artists, there's the embodiment part. Um, so what I would say is improvisation, that state of openness and that trying to get to that state where you're not censoring, that you're just letting things flow, to be in the flow or a flux, and that it also takes time. It takes time to get there, and lots of investigation. And so, usually for creations, I have so much material or so many improvisations, and then you kind of have to craft it. So, like this one was really interesting, and I really want to move and explore this a bit more. And then you go forward with that, and in that way you start to build and you start to get a direction. I hope that helps. Any other questions? Yes, I have my website, Kahawi Dance. I just updated that. I wanted to share one more video. This is a really important video for me, and it really is part of the work that I've been doing for the past. When did I start? What was like the past 6 years? Working with and being inspired by working at the Mohawk Institute, which is Canada's first residential school. My great grandmother attended at the age of 2 until she was a teenager. We don't know any of her history of her experience there. And then my grandfather on my father's side, this is all on my paternal side, went as a teenager with all of his family. And we also don't know of their experience. So in a way, I am intergenerational survivor of the Mohawk Institute. And early in my career, I would have never thought that I'd be working at the Mohawk Institute, and But as Truth and Reconciliation and the truth of that school came about and my connection to it, and then trying to understand who I was and my family history and why we react sometimes the way we do, and our loss of language, all of those things. As a result of that, I became more interested. But again, I wasn't really ready to work in that in that space until I was invited from an outside um, um, producer. And so back in 2016, I started to work at the school. So the very first thing we did, and I wanted to work with youth, and I brought two youth actually, to come in, and we worked inside the school in the basement boys' playroom, and we had a ceremony to begin to announce our arrival and be aware of the energy and the history and the children lingering energies that might be there, to work in a good way and to be protected. And so since that time, I've been working with survivors. I've been working on a lot of community research, and ended up creating and producing a piece called The Mush Hole, which we toured and will continue to tour once we're able to do that. And also recently we did a piece called Continuance, and I want to show a video of this before we leave. And I think there was a link to a recent article from CBC Indigenous, and you get to hear some of the survivors that I work with, Roberta Hill and Don Hill, who are really bringing forward truth and healing from their experiences, and then sharing that with others and educating. So I'm going to see if I can try this video again. It might click out. I don't know why it clicked out the last time. I'm on Six Nations, so we don't have really good Wi-Fi either. Okay, share screen. Here we go. that work?
Yes, we saw everything. Is the
Okay.
link that I posted, the cbc.ca, does that have the link to the video that you just presented?
It doesn't, but it has a link to another video, which is the interviews. The link for that one is the National Art Center YouTube channel, and it's called Continuance. Yeah. So in that one, that was an excerpt. The whole show was a bit longer. We threw. Hello? Your music. Is that me? Oh, sorry. What? I need to close these down now. Okay. Sorry about that. So that you can't notice it there, but we actually went through the whole Thanksgiving address. So in terms of what we projected on the building, is what I wanted to do was to reclaim that space. We wanted to put and impose all of our traditional knowledge and fundamental ways of thinking, which I said at the very beginning with the address, and we went through every visually, and we went through every part of Thanksgiving in the order that it goes. And the other thing that we did is 3 times within that we disintegrated and dismantled the actual facade of the building. So you saw that once with the fire. So we exploded and burnt down the school, which was it was burned down twice by students. So that was, and again, following in their footsteps of burning it down. But we rebuilt it with our Thanksgiving address, and you saw the water come over to purify that space. We disintegrated it through the power of our thunderers. The thunderers, as I mentioned before, are purification, cleansing the earth and cleansing our minds and our spirit. So we disintegrated the facade through the power of the storm. And the last one is we disintegrated the facade through the celebration and the raising of our voices at the end. And then we had the celebration. The celebration was not because, hey, everything is rosy now. The celebration was following along in that Thanksgiving address, that we are a part of this creative universe, that we're a dancing, singing, living, breathing, relational part of the universe. And that's what we offered. And through the guidance of a lot of survivors over the years, and for that as well. And part of that was to transform the space, to offer healing, and to offer a creative outlet that promoted healing, awareness, and really just showcased our Ongwe Hoi Neha, our ways of understanding the world, and that it's so important at this time when the world is facing many challenges. Those fundamental understandings of how to be, the values that guide us, are so important to remember. So, Nyawegoa, thank you so much.
Yeah, Santi, I think that I would be accurate and representing that everybody who joined today was very moved, just between your intimate relationship with Haudenosaunee culture, your language is very stunning, and the video at the end was very moving to me, and I believe that most people on this call would agree. Seeing the contrast between the boarding schools and reclaiming that space as our own was, for me, it embodied a sense of pride and resilience, and not so much sorrow that folks who are on the call may or may not be aware of the history of boarding schools, but They were a place where culture was stripped from the Haudenosaunee and Native people across these lands. And to see that you reclaiming that space was very, very powerful and very symbolic, I think, to everybody who watches that. So thank you for your work. And if anybody has any questions, we have a few more moments if you wanted to unmute and ask Santi directly or put in the chat box. We'll we'll give folks a few more minutes to ask those questions.
I can't see everybody, so I can only see chats.
Sure, we have a question that just came in the chat box if you want to field that one.
How has your creative work inspired your leadership? I think my creative work continues to inspire my leadership. So through the creative process, which is has been over the years very much trying to work through a Haudenosaunee process. My background is formal classical Western ballet, so I had to sort of relearn, unlearn how to move, and also taking that into the creative process. And what actually my company right now is going through, just going through a strategic Haudenosaunee planning process, which is to be able to take that way of working that we have been doing creatively and move it into the organization, so that we're actually, as a whole organization, going through we are this company that is embodying, speaking, governing, planning, making decisions, problem solving from a Haudenosaunee perspective. So creatively was the lead, and then how to bring that into our organization in every aspect.
Well, I think, we have one more question.
Mm-hmm. With your role as chancellor, how does it go? How does leadership move into the role of chancellor? Well, I am breaking with the usual chancellor person. Yes, I'm an artist. Past chancellors have always come from the business sector, and I think my role is an example of the shift that organizations are looking for in leadership, that bring us back to values, and different values that are more humanistic. And so my role is very as a symbol, as a representative for the whole university. And I'm not an active part of making basic decisions, but bringing my sense of who I am and my experience to that role of leadership has already made some transformation within the university, and changing of perspectives from I give a lot of addresses, and for the first time last year at the Remembrance Day ceremony, I acknowledge all of our Indigenous veterans. So that was something completely new to the university, that brings a different awareness and opens up the perspective a little bit more. And yeah, so there's a lot of work that I do, that I can do, mostly through representation. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Santi, I think that we will conclude today. Do you have any final remarks? You've really covered a lot of ground today. As you mentioned in the beginning, it's such a vast landscape. Do you have any final remarks?
Yeah. Well, thanks just thank you. I thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed sharing. And yes, these are huge topics. These are lifelong learning process of delving into ancient and bringing it relevant into our lives and into the future. But continue to do this good work, and blessings, and skana, peace, all of you.
Yahweh, thank you.